We talk today about the 99% versus the 1%, but most people don't realize that this is how the system was designed to function. It's not something that happened recently. The elite didn't have to work very hard to get what they wanted out of government because they ran government. The elite didn't have to plead with business leaders to get business to listen to their needs because they were the business leaders. Activists today talk a lot about how large corporations have captured the regulatory agencies, have captured government. The only problem with this analysis is it's wrong. The people who run large corporations like Monsanto and Exxon and Halliburton and Burlington Northern, these folks run the regulatory agencies, and they already have, always have. Corporate leaders were there at the table from the very beginning. So if you're an anti-GMO activist, or an anti-RBGH activist, or an anti-factory farms activist, or a pro-raw milk activist, I'm here to tell you, the regulatory agencies that make decisions day in and day out about what kinds of agriculture we're going to have in this country, regulatory agencies like the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, or the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, corporate leaders didn't have to capture these agencies to make them into servants of those corporations. They didn't have to capture them because these agencies were designed to serve the agriculture and food processing industries. They were designed by the very corporate leaders who they now supposedly regulate. The food regulations themselves were written by these same corporate leaders. What I'm telling you should be obvious to every food activist in the country, but it's not. And I'll tell you how I know this to be true. And this brings me back to whether the United States of America was designed as a truly democratic republic or not. Let me ask you a question. If you had grown up in a country run by a totalitarian government, a government that everybody knew was not interested in responding to the needs of its people, would you plead with government leaders? Would you lobby your elected officials? Of course not. Why not? Because the people of that country would know it was a waste of their time. The government of that totalitarian state didn't care what the people wanted. They had their own agenda. They served a very small sector of the population, and they didn't give a damn about what the majority wanted. So how would the people challenge a totalitarian government? They would try to build people power at a scale that would be difficult for the government to take on.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at our current situation today in the United States. Very few hands went up when I asked if you believed you lived in a democratic society. And yet look at the kinds of activism that most of us are doing in the anti-GMO movement. We're pleading with our elected officials to stop the tremendous damage being done to our environment and to people's health by these out-of-control agriculture and food processing companies. We're attending USDA and FDA regulatory hearings. We're writing letters to these agencies, begging them to not allow the latest GMO outrage. We're signing petition after petition. In other words, we are playing a game that was created by agriculture corporations, the regulatory game. Regulatory agencies were created way back in the 1880s. They were created specifically to funnel citizen participation into a narrower and narrower space where we the people ended up with no real voice. The system is working, folks. It's not broken at all. It's working just as it was designed. The USDA and the FDA are working as they were designed, day in and day out, shielding agriculture and food processing corporations from our rage. The sooner we realize that this entire structure of law, regulatory law, was put there to tie we the people in knots, to make our voices irrelevant, the sooner we will shift gears and then start doing a very different kind of activism. A kind of activism where we the people seize back our authority to govern ourselves. So far I've been sharing a pretty darn depressing history with you, but believe it or not, the main reason I'm here today is to share with you the good news. The good news is that for the past 13 years, communities across this country have been rising up and starting to challenge the actual structures of law that make real democracy not just difficult, but literally impossible, illegal. These structures of law include corporations having won a whole variety of constitutional so-called rights, such as free speech rights, property rights, privacy rights, protection against search and seizure rights, and many others. All of these so-called corporate rights came directly out of the Supreme Court. Talk about an activist court. It's an outrage. But there's more. State governments use laws called state preemption and Dillon's rule to ban local governments from protecting their human and non-human residents from corporate harm. What are we doing to challenge this? In 150 communities in 8 states, we've passed laws now that are themselves acts of civil disobedience against these unjust structures of law. We've passed laws that ban corporate factory farms, corporate fracking, corporate water withdrawal for bottling, corporate sludge dumping on farmland. These laws also strip corporations of all of their so-called constitutional rights. These laws directly challenge the authority of state governments to tell us what we can and cannot pass local laws about. We call ourselves the Community Rights Movement, and there are folks walking through the crowd right now with flyers about our work. I'm here to tell you that 2 counties in the Willamette Valley of Oregon are about to make history. Benton and Lane counties are just weeks from filing community rights ordinances that will prohibit corporations from engaging in unsustainable agricultural practices. If these ordinances are approved by the voters next May, the planting of genetically modified seeds will be banned in Benton and Lane counties. Those who are already growing genetically modified crops in those counties will be held personally and financially liable if their pollen drifts into neighboring farms and contaminates other crops. These ordinances are referred to as a Food Bill of Rights. They enshrine into local law a right to sustainable food systems, a right to seed heritage, a right of natural communities to exist, persist, and evolve. That's rights of nature, rights for nature.
Yeah.
And finally, a right to self-government. They are legally binding and locally enforceable. We citizens are not merely consumers who vote with our dollars. We are not merely single-issue activists who battle against one corporate atrocity at a time. We are we the people.
Yeah.
That is where our primary power resides, and we need to remember that truth. I am thrilled to be able to announce to you that over the past few months, the national staff of the Organic Consumers Association has been meeting with myself and my colleagues in the Community Rights Movement, and they're very, very excited about what we're doing in Benton and Lane counties. They're very, very excited about a rights-based strategy that strips agricultural corporations of their so-called rights. They agree with us that the Food Bill of Rights is a powerful new tool in ending the dominance of Monsanto and other agricultural corporations.